Hello. Today I will be returning to the tier 10 Japanese DD that has received another nerf. That is of course the Shimakaze. Now, I say another nerf. The first nerf this line received was of course when they got rid of the absolutely ridiculous 20 km torpedoes. There was a time when everyone and their sister was playing Shimokaze pretty much on a daily basis. It was by far the most played ship, and the 20 km torps were incredibly powerful because they were hard to detect, and because thanks to their range it meant that DDs could launch them from complete safety, and there was 3 to 4 Shimas per game minimum, sometimes even more, and it just turned the game into a goddamn nightmare. So getting rid of those 20 km torps was very much necessary, and that was a nerf I agreed with. Sadly, however, I don't exactly agree with how they made that nerf happen, because instead of just getting rid of the 20 km torps as they should have, they instead made them practically unusable by making the concealment on the 20 km torps so bad that anyone who uses them will have absolutely abysmal results. Now the problem here is that if you hover your mouse over them, it says that it increases your torpedo rating, while in fact they are the worst torpedoes. So your average new player, your average Bob, who doesn't really understand to look at the concealment of torpedoes, will be using the 20 km torps regardless, and wondering why his performance is absolutely abysmal, and that's of course, basically he doesn't know why his performance is abysmal because he doesn't understand the difference in concealment on the torps. And that of course heavily skews all the stats for the ship in general, and I have no idea how they're supposed to balance any of this when they leave out this massive weakness which will heavily skew the stats for every Shima player out there. How do you differentiate between the ones that actually understand to not use the 20 km torps and the ones who don't? So while I agreed with the nerf of the 20 km torps, I disagreed with how they did it. In my opinion, they should have just removed them and made life a lot easier for the average new player instead of confusing them like this. Now, by the way, if you notice there, I tried to tell my Des Moines to push in a radar. He had a great spawn to push between B and C, where he could have pushed into complete safety between the two caps and just radar to help our DDs out massively. Instead, he turned around and sailed towards a D. So, I mean, you can't have it all. Anyway, regardless. The second nerf, which is the one I'm mentioning now, is actually a nerf to the guns. And you see I push up to torp this Montana, Kagero shows up, I shoot a volley at him, but I'm not really interested in fighting that Kagero at all. In fact, all I want to do is launch volleys at this Montana and get out of here. Now what they've done is they have reduced the alpha damage and the fire chance on the guns, but in return they have increased the fire rate a bit. Now the fire rate increase actually compensates for the loss of alpha damage, meaning that your DPM actually stays the same, but the reduction in fire chance to 7% means that you start significantly less fires than you did in the past. Someone calculated you start, what was it, 14% less fires now? So that is obviously a significant nerf. No, got a good torp volley on that Montana. That is obviously a significant gun nerf because using the guns in general was already quite risky, because in general you want to stay undetected, and when using them you want to be using them from smokes and such. So it became even more RNG based and even more... The risk-reward rate of using a smoke to start fires has been skewed a bit too much in my opinion. And I really don't understand where this nerf is coming from, because this was already one of the great weaknesses of the Shimakaze. The Shimakaze's strength has always been the great torps, or the incredibly, well, great torps can be argued because of Fletcher and gearing concealment on their torps, but at least the pure damage on the volleys of the Shimakaze has always been the strength. The volleys of torps, that is, whereas gunpowder has always been the weakness. So why on earth they are nerfing what was already considered a weakness is something I really don't understand at all. I don't understand where it's coming from. Nerfing the guns was something that I could have supported back when they had their ridiculous 20 km torps, because they had too many good things. But now that they have already nerfed those, going back now months and months later and nerfing the guns makes absolutely no sense at all. So this is just confusing to me. Another silliness that occurs because of this weird nerf is that the Yugumo is actually now, well, the old Kagero, the new T9, the Yugumo, is actually now a better gun boat. Not only does it have better gun range, but it also reloads faster. In fact, with basic firing training, you can get the Yugumo down to 5.1, whereas the Shimakaze is 5.4. So the Yugumo actually is better at picking fights than the T10, which kind of reminds me of the old Gearing versus Fletcher situation. Well, kind of still current Gearing versus Fletcher situation. And that is in no way a good thing. I have no idea what they're thinking. So I heavily disagree with this entire nerf. It also, the old style of heavier alpha damage on the guns also synergized much better with the playstyle of the Shimakaze, where you would pick opportunistic fights and you would, just as you're about to disappear into smoke, or just as you're about to disappear behind a corner, you'd launch one powerful volley at the enemy, and you could use this to chip down huge threats like Fletchers or Gearings or stuff like that. You could use it, or even against Russian deities, you could use it to chip away at them every time when you disappear into cover, you take a chunk of their HP out. And this new style of guns, or the way they are nerfed, doesn't really synergize with that kind of playstyle at all. And you don't really want to be in extended gunfights with the Shimokaze, because that's obviously weakness. That's where US deities, that's where Russian deities shine, extended gunfights, whereas that has never been your strength, and now they're kind of trying to make it into that, but all they're really doing is giving it a nerf. However, ultimately, the main power of the Shimokaze has always been in the torpedoes. This change to the guns, while it is annoying, it's ultimately not the biggest deal. Because, well, your strength comes from the torps. My builds have always been heavily focused on making the torps as good as possible, as short of a cooldown as possible, and basically strengthening them in every way possible. My philosophy has always been that make your strength as strong as possible to overcome any potential weaknesses. And it's been working fairly well, and it's still the build I recommend. Kagero spots me, I instantly smoke up, I don't want to eat any Zhao HE wallies here. I launch a full spread of torps against the Zhao. Now the angle I launched them at was pretty terrible, straight at the ship. That is the worst angle, well, almost the worst. Straight from behind is even worse. But all I really want to do is hit one, because you do so much damage to something like a Zhao. You see what a huge chunk of HP he lost. So I just want to chip him down, because my main goal is obviously to move and defend against these ships coming from deep. Now, one of those volleys, one of those spreads, it's the most damaging spreads in the game. I mean, you might go, oh, Shiratsu, you can launch 16 torps with a 4-minute cooldown. Yeah, but that entire spread of 16 torps does 275k damage. A Shimakaze full spread can do 320,000, and they are stupidly fast. And when you launch them from the right angles, it doesn't matter how good you are at evading. If they come from a surprising angle, doesn't matter really almost what battleship it is, you're gonna get one shot. So, how do you deal with this recent Shimakaze nerf? Well, you make sure you use your torpedoes in the most devastating way possible. And here is, of course, an example of it. My torpedoes are about to get reloaded, but I'm not gonna use them. Because as I said earlier, launching torps straight at someone coming straight at you is the worst possible angle. In fact, these battleships coming from deep, it's obvious they want to turn in towards B, they want to turn into those caps and bring the fight to them. Or even if they want to continue straight down this H line, which they are, launching torps from where I am will only let them know that there's a DD waiting for them. So that's the last thing I want to do. Now I know where they are heading, so I know where I need to go to get the optimal angle, and that's of course straight south of them, so I can get the broadside angle. Just like with any other ship, any other battleship, cruiser, whatever, you want to get when you want to get broadsides of ships to launch citadels, exactly the same thing applies to torpedoes. You want to get that broadside salvo. As soon as he starts turning out, well, in this case turning in towards the caps, that's when I launch my volley. Because he gives me full perfect broadside, and it's exactly what you want, that full perfect broadside. These torpedoes are stupidly fast, they do an insane amount of damage, so you don't really need to hit many, and when you spread them out like I do in a fan-like spread like this, it makes it impossible to dodge them, even if they make some last minute changes. You see how few seconds it was since I launched that volley, how quickly it arrives at target. He sees them, he turns into them. It doesn't matter that he's turning into them, because they came straight at the broadside, and he didn't have any chance. It's much like a Yamato volley coming in at when you're showing full broadside in a battleship. I mean, sure, you can start turning into the volley, but you're not going to make it in time before the shells land. The same thing applies here. It doesn't matter if you have vigilance. These torps are simply too fast. So to deal with this latest gunfire patch, it's all about reading your opponent and simply getting better at torping the target, because your guns are even less reliable than in the past now. This torpedo turns towards me or sails towards me, but it's obvious that he can't keep sailing towards nothingness. He's gonna turn back eventually, which is what I'm waiting for. And now that he's turning back, well, I sail to his broadside. You see, I'm closing the distance. I don't want to get any closer than 5.9, and I don't want to linger. That's something you see a lot of DDs do. They linger at this distance all the time, and then they get spotted by a spotter plane or a fighter plane. No, the only time I go to this very, very close distance, where it's such a short distance for my torps to travel, one behind, one in the middle, and one in front, creating that spread of torps, and I instantly turn away. You often see DDs linger too close and then they get spotted for no reason. There's no reason to do that. The only time you want to spend close to enemies is when your torps are ready. The rest of the time, maintain a healthy distance so you don't risk getting spotted, because one of your key strengths when using this F3 build especially is catching the opponent from a direction or angle they don't expect. Now you see this guy, he sees the torps as well, he tries to turn, but see how fast they are? You're not going to dodge that. That would have been 6 or 7 hits of torps, not even 5, but I only needed 5 to kill him. And that strength, luckily that strength, the sheer strength of the torpedoes still remains unchanged. I don't agree with the gun nerf, but the torps are still the same, and the torps have always been the main strength of this ship. Now, this game that I was using as an example ends 211,000 damage, always satisfying, 14 torpedo hits. Base XP, I only got 1 cap and it kind of shows, and I only got 2 kills, which were the torpedoes. I didn't really kill any of the other ships. But you can see the game time, less than 12 minutes and still breaking 200,000. Only 14 torps landed, but those 14 torps gave me 193,000 damage. So this strength still remains untouched. Anyway, since it's been such a long time since I last... Well, actually it hasn't been a long time, but since there has been a recent patch that has significantly changed the Shimakaze, I will go over my build as usual, just in case there's no confusion. Right, starting off, I'll go to the modules. The torps I use and recommend are the type F3, that 1.9 km torpedo detectability, just like these 12 km ones, but ultimately I find that the speed and reload advantage of the F3s make them significantly more valuable than these ones. They have the same concealment on the torpedoes as the type 93 ones, just less damage. And these are of course the default ones, the stock ones. They give you a lot of torpedo rating, but they are absolute garbage. The 2.5 km concealment or detectability, as well as the low speed, means they can be spotted a mile away. Do not ever use them. Smoke generator, if you're gonna go premium, at least use a premium smoke gen. I use all of them, but at least if you're gonna use one, use the smoke generator. Upgrade wise, main armaments, aiming systems mod 1, and finally, of course, torpedo tubes modification. As I've said, torps are your bread and butter on the ship, always have been, always will be, so get that torpedo reload down. Propulsion mod, losing engine means gliding out of smokes, get that one. Rudder shift, now usually on a ship with this good of a rudder shift, I'd be using the acceleration mod, but since you don't really want to spend too much time in smoke sitting still, you should be getting the rudder shift. It's simply not the Shimokaze playstyle to idle around in smokes. And concealment system mod 1 to get that great concealment. Captain perks wise, basic firing training, followed by last stand. You get last stand first before the torpedo reload, vigilance, survivability expert, concealment expert, and now when you get 17 points, that's when you get the torpedo reload. You see a lot of people take them the other way around, and that's absolutely retarded. You don't do that. And finally, basics of survivability as the 18th point. This reduces fires, broken engines, all this kind of stuff that can get you killed as well. So it is actually a very good use of the 18th point. Anyway, That was my updated take on the Shimokaze. I'm still using the same build, since my old build always focused on the torpedoes, and that is still absolutely the way to go. I don't agree with this latest nerf, but luckily this latest nerf really isn't that big of a deal.